Background. I spent the night with a man who was not my husband. Before I left, I told my husband I would be home before sunrise, and I did come back before then. David was waiting for me. I thought he would be asleep, and I would get into bed next to him like usual. But if you're reading this, you know that is not what happened. David said he would divorce me if I didn't tell him who the man was. It took me 2 days to tell him. Now I wonder if telling him right away could have saved our marriage. Maybe. One day I will ask him. The man I stayed with was Claude Weatherby. The problem was, we both worked at the same company, and the company had strict rules about behavior. I quit before they could fire me. Weatherby had a run-in with David and ended up worse off. Even after I told David the man's name, he still divorced me. Looking back, I see he was right, for all the reasons he said. I was very foolish to think David would just accept what I did. But now I want him back, and I will do whatever I can to make that happen. This is my story. The story. My parents convinced David to let me move back into the house. Not as a wife or partner, but as a tenant. That's when I found out that even though my parents were over 60, they still had a lively relationship. Between moving out and coming back, David and I worked out the money details. We split the savings. He would keep the house and pay me what he could each month, since he was now paying the full mortgage without my salary. I would pay him some rent while my part of the savings lasted or until I got a new job. This way, he could manage the mortgage with the rent I gave him. We both knew he couldn't pay me much for my share of the house, but the money would keep going back and forth in the family, which I was okay with. This fit my plan. It worked for me that he didn't sell the house. I wanted him close by so I could find him, not far away. The first morning back, David gave me some papers. One was a rental agreement showing how much rent I would pay. It said I had no claim to the house. When the utility bills came, we would split those in half. I signed it without arguing. The other paper was a list of house rules. I agreed to them, though I planned to bend a few. The rules said I would pay rent and stay in our daughter Julie's room because it was more feminine than our son Jack's. We also agreed how to share chores. Each of us would cook our own food and clean our own dishes. We would do our own laundry. David would take care of the trash, repairs, and garden, while I would keep the house neat. We both would take care of our own cars. He cleared out a kitchen cupboard for my food and took half the fridge, so we each had our own space for our things. He still had his own fridge for beer, but he let me keep my white wine there. The rules were simple, but very one-sided. There were still more than 5 months left before the divorce was final. But David decided we were free to do what we wanted, and we didn't have to wait for the divorce to be over. I think he wanted to punish me, and it worked. I was sure there was no way he would stop the divorce. He warned me many times that if I became close to another man, he would go through with the divorce. David is the kind of man who keeps his promises when he can. This was one promise he could keep. I had no choice in this. I wasn't allowed to bring a man to the house, but he could bring a woman. There were other rules, but they didn't matter. I had no plans to bring another man here or to be with anyone else but David. If he brought a woman here after what I did, I would have to accept it. But I didn't think he would rub it in my face. He was too kind for that. We were both getting older. Neither of us would likely live to be in our 80s again. Neither of us looked bad. In fact, I found out I still looked quite good, and so did David when he made the effort. He was a good-looking, funny, smart, and polite man. If he wanted, he probably wouldn't have any trouble finding a woman after the divorce. But I had an advantage over any other woman. I had known David for more than 25 years. We had made a family together. I knew what he liked and didn't like. He was turned off by cheating, of course, but I also knew what he enjoyed, and I would use that knowledge carefully. I had to be careful, though, because he could see through any trick I tried to get us back together. The one person I had to watch out for was my old friend Sophie. She had promised David some kind of revenge for my actions, which was strange, because she was the one who encouraged me to do what I did. Now, with what David knows, I doubt he would want anything to do with her. I thought, maybe she pushed me that way so she could spend time with David herself as part of her open marriage. But she and her husband, Tony, agreed not to be with anyone they knew. Though, from what I had seen, Sophie didn't really care about those rules. I spent all my time looking for a new job. I had a few interviews. There weren't many jobs for electronic engineers in our town. Besides, I had to leave my last job because of what happened with Claude Weatherby, which went against company rules. I had to look farther away for work. I had some job interviews through different websites after sending in my CV. But they were far away and would mean moving to another town. That didn't fit with my plan to get my husband back. I needed a job close enough to travel to every day. For the first 2 weeks, I kept my distance from David. I mostly stayed in my room watching TV. I only left for meals and to do some housework when David was at work. Most of my time was spent looking for jobs. David worked long hours on his new project. He was designing the inside of ambulances with all their electronic tools. He didn't tell me much about his work. I think he threw himself into his job after what had happened between us. Also, the extra pay would help with our bills. After 2 weeks, I felt it was the right time to try being kind. I started doing small things for him, like making tea or coffee, and giving him some when I made one for myself. That's what people living together do for each other. One night, about a month in, David said he'd be very late. He sent me a message to let me know. Even though I had no right, I had asked him before to tell me when he'd be late. I told him I still cared about him, so it felt harsh he didn't tell me. What if something had gone wrong or he had an accident? Again, that's what people living together do for each other. That evening, I made dinner but cooked too much. When David came home, I could tell he was tired. I hoped he hadn't stopped to buy food on the way, and he hadn't. I told him I had some extra stew and dumplings if he wanted. I said there was only one dumpling left. He took some. Stew and dumplings weren't his favorite, but he did like it. I made it how he liked: big potato pieces, herbs, thick gravy, and no onions. When he sat down, I took a bottle of his beer from the fridge, along with a glass and opener, and put them in front of him. He poured it himself. There were cans in the fridge, but it was easier for me to get a bottle and glass. In a way, we were working together. I smiled at him and then went to bed. The next morning, I got up early. When David came down, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop. He still looked tired. I was just checking emails. He thanked me for dinner the night before. I told him there was some tea in the pot if he wanted. He helped himself. After he sat down, I asked if he wanted toast or cereal for breakfast. Before he could answer, I went to the cupboard, got his bread, and put it in the toaster. I went to David's fridge and got some butter and marmalade. I took a knife and a small plate and put them in front of him. He would spread the butter on his own toast. When the toast popped up, I put it on his plate and took my laptop with me. We kept this breakfast routine for the next week. It felt easy and calm, just what I wanted. I didn't cook any other meals for him because it would have seemed forced, and he would have noticed. The next week, my TV stopped working. I was about to watch one of our favorite shows we used to enjoy together. I told David my TV was broken and asked if I could borrow a fuse. He said I knew where they were, so I took one. It wasn't the fuse that caused the problem, which didn't surprise me. I'm an electronics engineer. I know how devices work and how to fix or break them. The show was about to start, so I asked David if I could watch it with him since my TV wasn't working. He agreed, and we sat at opposite ends of the sofa. During a commercial break, I went to make tea for both of us. That's what we would have done back in the day, though we'd usually sit closer together. I don't know if he noticed my little plan. He didn't say anything. We still never ate meals together. I knew he went out a few times, mostly with friends from work. When he came back, I never noticed any sign that he had been with any women. The only time I left the house was to visit my parents. I made sure my mother told him where I was and called him to let him know I got home safely. Some old workmates asked me to go out with them, but I said no. I thought they wanted help with a project I had left behind. Instead, I invited them to my house for coffee. Several of my former engineer friends had been there when David came home. No one ever talked about what happened to the man I had stayed with, Claude Weatherby. It seemed like he just vanished from everyone's memory, except for some noise from the boss's office. The CFO had shouted, "Don't expect to be invited for Christmas lunch, now leave." After that, Claude never showed up at work again. People probably guessed what happened, but no one asked. I had a few job interviews, but there weren't many openings nearby. It seemed I was too experienced, and most companies wanted someone younger and cheaper. Then I got an interview with a company that supplied parts to Bright Electronics, where I used to work. It wasn't really an interview, but more like a friendly talk with other engineers. They asked my thoughts on some of their ideas, and I gave them my honest answers. What surprised me was that they offered me the job right away. I had a feeling something wasn't quite right. That feeling was a little clearer when I left the building, happy, and my new boss said, "Oh, by the way, Nigel Weatherby sends his regards." Nigel Weatherby was the CFO of Bright Electronics and the father of the man I had spent the night with. I wasn't sure how to feel about that. Maybe it was a way of saying sorry for his son's actions, but I couldn't put all the blame on Nigel's son. I shared some of it too. I tried to push that night out of my mind. It was something I wanted to forget. I didn't know if I should laugh or cry on the way home. With help from my parents, I had managed to keep my car. I had planned to sell it and use the bus, but that didn't happen. Part of the reason my father wanted me back at Dave's house was that he lived on a bus route, while we didn't. The job was as a production manager, not something I had done before. My task was to make the circuit boards more reliable and try to lower costs. It didn't pay as much as Bright's, but there were chances to grow. I thought it was a good thing. David knew I was going to an interview and when it would end. He sent me a text asking how it went. I didn't want to say too much, so I just replied, "It went okay." Later, I sent another message. "Are you home?" He said, "No, leaving in 10. I told him, "I'm hungry. I don't want to cook. Can I bring something for both of us?" He said, "Okay, keep it simple." I added, "I want Chinese, but I don't have enough money. Can you cover me?" He thought I was short on cash. Well, I was, since most of my money was saved and I couldn't get to it easily. I waited nervously for his reply. I knew Chinese was his favorite. Then he wrote back, "Okay, go ahead and overdraw. He'll send money later to cover it. But it's just a loan." If I hadn't been sitting in my car outside the Chinese place, I would have been dancing for joy. I knew exactly what he liked. While waiting for the food, I went to the local shop and picked up a cheap bottle of red wine. David was home when I arrived, and the plates were already on the kitchen table. I brought in the food and held up the wine bottle. I said, "I got the job. I start next Monday. Hope that's okay. I splurged a little, but it's just a cheap bottle." What surprised me most was the big smile on his face. I felt he was really happy for me. That was the first time in about 7 weeks we ate together. That made me happy too. We sat down, and I told him all about the interview, my new job, and what I already knew. I looked across my wine glass at the man I loved. Yes, I was being a little clever, but I hadn't told any lies. This man had not left my heart. I might have left his after what I did. But he was still deeply inside mine. I had to be here with him to make up for the pain I caused, to help him heal. He sat there eating the food and drinking the poor wine. He was the happiest I had seen him in a while. That was what I wanted the man sitting across from me to be happy. I quickly wiped away a tear. I think he noticed because he looked up from his dinner and smiled. When we finished, I cleared the plates. There were not many. David took the wine and my glass into the living room, then grabbed himself a beer. It was Friday night. He would have more than one. I thought about trying to get closer to him tonight, but decided it wasn't a good idea. David turned the television on, but there was nothing interesting on. My own TV was still broken. I told him more about my new job, and he seemed truly happy for me. Then I said, I think my old CFO, Nigel Weatherby, had a part in it. I wondered how he would react to the name Weatherby. Nothing good. It was Saturday evening. David was in the conservatory reading. It looked like some kind of document or data sheet. He was taking notes on a pad. He had worked all day. I asked if I could connect to the printer to print my new contract, which needed signing and returning. He said yes. That was good. The papers were already waiting to print. I went back to my laptop and hit print. After it finished, I took the papers and walked into the conservatory. He smiled when he saw me. I held up the contract and said, I have you to thank for letting me stay here and for all your support. You've been good to me, you never yelled, and you treated me with respect and as an equal. Your quiet support has meant a lot. I want to thank you properly. I placed the papers down, walked over to him, and took the sheet and his notepad from his hands, putting them on the windowsill. I reached over to gently undo his belt. He clearly understood what I was trying to do and grabbed my wrists, looking at me seriously. No, we can't do that, remember, we're separated. Who would know? I whispered. You could tell the court, he said. Why would I do that? If I tell the court, it will delay the divorce by months, and you might ask me to leave. Trust me, I won't tell anyone. I tilted my head, thinking. The only risk is Mr. Jones next door seeing us. He looks over the fence a few times a year, so yes, it's risky but manageable. I don't think his cat would tell on us either. He smiled. By now, I had managed to undo his zipper and was close to him. I realized then how much I wanted to be near him again. I managed to free him from his trousers. He lifted himself so I could pull them down more. Then it happened. I couldn't help myself. I took him in my mouth completely. I heard him make a sound and looked up at him. He liked it when I did that, but he couldn't see me. His head was back, and his eyes were closed. I pulled away, moved up, and placed my legs on each side of the chair. I moved aside and then sat on him. It felt really good. I didn't want to say it out loud, but being with him felt better than at Weatherby. My eyes were closed. I just enjoyed the feeling as I moved slowly. He grabbed my waist and slid us off the chair onto the floor. He began to move slowly and steadily. I wrapped my arms and legs around him. I didn't want him to leave. He went faster. It was strong and deep. His head rested on my shoulder as he moved. I felt myself getting close. I wanted to shout because it felt so good. I made some sounds, but he knows that loud sounds would cause trouble. I'm coming, I said. He pulled away a little and covered my mouth with his hand. That was it, one last movement. And I made a noise into his hand. I held on to his neck, my legs around his waist, not wanting to let go. I felt him shake as he reached his limit. He took his hand away. I breathed in deeply. He said quietly, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have covered your mouth. Then it was my turn. I rolled over so he was on his back and I was on top. He was still close to me, but starting to slow down. Looking up at me, he said, Go on, say it. I shook my head. I wanted to, but it didn't feel right. Go on, say it, he said again, but I just shook my head. Then he'll say it for you. You're sorry. You love me. That's exactly what I was going to say, but he kept going. And guess what? I'm sorry too. I still love you. But I can't stay married to you. That's exactly what I wanted to say. Well, not the last part, but I had already accepted that we were going to get a divorce. I leaned forward, kissed him softly, and said, I know. I'm not asking you to stay. That's not what this was about. It was about saying thank you, and well, we know each other well enough now we both have needs. We both tried to get ready, but neither of us really knew what to do next. It felt a little awkward, so I stood up and picked up my contract. I looked at him and spoke quietly and gently, Thank you. Then I left. The next day, I went down for breakfast at my usual time, but Dave didn't show up. To avoid awkwardness, I went to see my parents and told them about my job. I didn't tell them about what I did to thank David. I didn't see Dave again until Sunday evening. I think he stayed out of the way, maybe even went to work. Later, he was sitting on the sofa, watching a Johnny English movie. He liked those because they were funny. I sat down at the far end of the sofa and tucked my legs under me. Then I turned to him. I almost called him sweetheart, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "David, can we talk about last night, please?" "I guess we should," he said. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have taken advantage of you, and I didn't mean to cover your nose either. Sorry about that." I felt a bit confused. He didn't take advantage of me. I almost took advantage of him. He was always a gentleman. "No, it was me. I was so happy, and you helped me by letting me stay here. You've been steady and supportive even when I didn't deserve it." He hesitated. There was a nervous look on his face I hadn't seen before. I didn't understand why. Then he surprised me. He asked, "Was it better than—" Oh, the complicated male pride. But I could answer that easily. I moved closer to him, took his hand, and kissed it. I had many thoughts running through my mind, mostly since Saturday. "Oh yes, much better." I kissed the back of his hand again. I know it was quick and rushed, but having someone who loves me close, not just someone using me, that matters. You have nothing to feel bad about, really nothing. It was true. I wasn't lying or hiding anything. I felt like this was something I could build on. I kissed his hand again and looked him in the eye. I shared my feelings honestly. I'd like to do this again. Maybe we could be friends with benefits? No strings attached. You could still see other people if you want. I saw many thoughts cross his face. He was trying to figure out if he was better now, or if love made it better, or if he was just better at being close to someone. That day in the conservatory didn't really count, it was love, but not the gentle, caring closeness we both knew as true closeness. "I don't know," he said. "I really don't know." I leaned in and kissed him. "Well, I do. I'll be here any time you want me." Then I stood up and walked away. I had a lot on my mind. His apology for covering my nose stuck with me. I thought about how it felt the difficulty breathing was a little exciting. I knew I needed to explore that more. I planned to talk to Summer, my therapist, about it. In the coming weeks, I slowly started to touch him gently when we passed each other. I didn't dress in a special way. It was just small touches and smiles. Summer was a kind woman with long, messy auburn hair. She wore flowing dresses in warm autumn colors, just like I imagined. She was quiet and gentle, speaking softly, but she could also be very direct. As an engineer, I respected that no beating around the bush or making excuses for me. If she thought I made a mistake or did something risky, she told me straight. I had talked to Summer about my need for taking risks. Somehow she agreed with me that I was addicted to it. I explained everything, the lay-by years ago, the steam train incident, and many other times in the past 20 years when I felt a strong thrill from doing something risky. People might only be a little upset if some adults were being bold outdoors, but if someone was tied to a tree, that would cause a very different reaction. I told Summer about Sophie and her open marriage. She thought maybe Sophie only needed that kind of release once every few months, and I was similar. I had a kind of pattern, needing the rush every 3 or 4 months. Since Derek and Jasmine's next plan was a long way off, my mind accepted that the risk to my job was worth it because I thought we would not get caught at work. Summer also said, "My love for David stopped me from risking my marriage." That's why I told him. She said I convinced myself that if I told David, it wasn't cheating. But Summer reminded me it was still cheating in everyone else's eyes, just not mine. And that was a very bad idea from the start. Looking back, I had to agree. I told her Sophie believed David's love would help him forgive me eventually. though it would be hard work. I even said Sophie had offered herself for revenge. Summer thought Sophie might have had other reasons for that. That idea had also crossed my mind. Summer kept asking, "Do you often let others trick you or control you?" I said, "No." She asked, "Do you mean at work, where you are in charge, or in your personal life, where you share things with David?" I said, "I don't think so." "But you let Sophie lead you, suggest things you knew were wrong, and let her push her ideas onto you." I thought about it and said, "Yes, I guess I did." "Well, that was a really bad thing to do, giving control to someone you knew wasn't honest." I started crying. Later, after I calmed down, I told her I couldn't go behind David's back. If I did and he found out, it would mean divorce right away. I hadn't even thought that he might divorce me if I told him the truth. Sophie agreed with me. I knew things would be difficult for a while, but I was sure he would forgive me in the end and we could fix things. I didn't want Sophie near my Dave. It seemed I didn't know him as well as I thought. Summer looked at me firmly and asked, "Do you think you used all this just to be with Weatherby because he's young and fit, and you felt attracted to him?" I stared at her, shocked. "No, not at all. I never thought like that." Then she said something quietly that shook me deeply. "How do you think David saw it? Do you think it crossed his mind?" Sadly, that was probably how David saw things. Summer went on to explain, even though she never met David, she could guess the kind of thoughts that ran through his head while he waited for me, and maybe he still thinks about them. She started listing what David might have wondered. Why wasn't he enough? What had he done wrong? She went on for a long time, naming all the feelings he might have had. I never wanted Dave to feel this way. After she finished, she said in her usual style, "Don't you think this was a really careless thing to do?" I had to agree with her on that. That meeting happened after David and I were together once in the conservatory. It wasn't making love, yet that's what I hoped for later. I told Summer about that moment and how tricky it was with old Mr. Jones next door. I also told her about David's hand over my mouth. At first, after meeting Summer, I thought she was overreacting. But after spending a few nights alone in Julie's bed, thinking, I knew she had a point. She said that now I knew I was addicted to taking risks, I could learn to control it better. It's like when you notice how loud someone is in the office, then you realize you're noisy too. Or when driving, you see someone do something dangerous and think, I've done that myself. Now I can see my need for risk, and I can keep it in check. I have to be honest with David and tell him I'm a risk addict. Using what I know about myself, if I ever feel that urge again, I must talk to Dave about it. He likes risk too. Does it affect him the same way? Maybe we'll find out someday. If I get back with David, you'll need to be open and tell him what I want. He's imaginative. I'm sure he can handle it quickly. If I have him again, I can afford to lose him. I don't want to take that chance again. That would be a risk too dangerous and not one I'm willing to take. The rest of the week went on like nothing had happened in the conservatory on Saturday night. I could tell he had been thinking, and I had been too. Now it was time to use what I knew about him. I still hadn't replaced my TV. We sat watching a movie again on Saturday night, both at opposite ends of the sofa. The credits were rolling. It was one of the Star Trek, The Next Generation movies. We both liked Star Trek and Star Wars. They tell different stories, but we liked Star Trek more. David, I said softly. David and Mary aren't allowed to be close like before. But what about Derek and Jasmine? He looked at me, surprised, his eyes wide and mouth slightly open. I went on. And all that goes with it. Not until you find a new girlfriend to take my place. What I said wasn't very kind, I know. I was pretty sure he wouldn't find a woman who did everything Mary and David did, or what Derek and Jasmine did. Yes, it was a move to get him back. It wasn't just about that kind of closeness, well, maybe part of it was, but what I really wanted was to be his wife again. That might not happen, but I had to try. I added, "Please just think about it." The next movie started. I stood up, went to the fridge, grabbed a beer for him, opened it, poured it into a glass, and brought it to him. I poured myself some wine and sat back down, still on my end of the sofa. When I looked over at him, I didn't think he was really watching the movie. We'd seen Top Gun before, anyway. Learning the new job and driving 30 miles in traffic meant I never knew exactly when I'd get home. I texted David when I left work, like I asked him to do if he was going to be late. It was what you do when you live with someone, so you don't worry. I quickly learned traffic was awful if I left work just 5 minutes late, but better if I left 20 minutes later. Of course, that didn't always work. A couple of times in those first 2 weeks, I came home to find David had cooked dinner for himself and left some for me, too. Since I was leaving for work before David, I started making him a pot of coffee in the morning and a pot of tea for myself. I knew he liked coffee in the morning. He would drink tea if I switched over, but it would seem too strange. I didn't like coffee early. I preferred tea in the afternoon. We started having quick breakfasts together. He'd have cereal or brown bread toast with butter and jam or marmalade. I had brown bread toast with honey. It had been over 2 weeks since what happened in the conservatory, and I thought it was time to try to get a response from him. I wasn't sure how to start, but then I knew. It was Saturday night, and Dave had been at work all day. It had been a tough week for both of us. He went out for a few drinks with his friends from the rugby club. Most of his workmates were in the club too, and some even played rugby. It was the cheap beer that brought them together. I thought he wouldn't be long since he looked really tired. I checked his phone and saw he was heading home, even earlier than I expected. I put on my short blonde jasmine wig and my high heels with red polish on my toes. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, waiting. Then I heard the key in the door, and I worried he might have brought friends with him. So, I quickly went upstairs. Luckily, he was alone. I heard the keys drop on the table. I walked down the stairs wearing only the wig and the heels. "Derek, you and Jasmine have had a really hard week," I said. "Maybe we both need some comfort." He looked at me, and I wasn't sure if I had said too much. "Your bed or mine? It doesn't matter," I said. He looked old and worn out. I wasn't sure how much of that was because of me. Maybe he had been burying himself in work to forget what had happened between us. My parents had convinced him to let me come back home, but he might have stayed at work to keep some distance. I knew his work was busy right now. They had a big new contract, something to do with ambulances for the military, but he said very little about it. Actually, since I returned, David and Mary hardly spoke, even at breakfast, which was different from before. It wasn't easy to have time together with such long hours, especially for David. This felt like a make-or-break moment, so I reached out to him, smiled, and tilted my head slightly. He came closer, and I took his hand, leading him upstairs. I went into my old bedroom, now just his. I turned him to face me, took off his tie, and unbuttoned his shirt. I helped him get more comfortable, slowly easing his shoes and socks off with care. But even then, something wasn't right. He looked even more tired. I knew this wasn't going to work the way I hoped. I stood up, took off my heels, and gently helped him to the bed. I pulled back the covers and laid him down softly. Then I climbed in beside him, holding his head on my shoulder. I think he was asleep in no time. Maybe what he needed most was my support and love instead of anything else. I quietly cried as I held my almost ex-husband. The wig was starting to itch, but I stayed there, just being close to him. I took it off but didn't put it too far away. He would have to wake up next to Jasmine, not his cheating, soon-to-be ex-wife. Around 3, he stirred his usual time to get up. I hid my face under the covers. By the time he finished, Jasmine was back again. When he got back to bed, I asked if he was okay. He smiled his warm smile and nodded gently. He held me close, which made it hard to take off the wig, but it was worth it. The sun came up early. I felt something else waking up too. Now it was Jasmine's time. I began to get him ready. He was already half ready. I helped him completely. He lay on his back while I sat on the top of him. I just stayed still. It felt good. I moved slowly back and forth. Nothing too fast. He let me keep going. Then I changed the movement to up and down. What I really wanted was for him to take control. After what my counselor said, I whispered in his ear, "Now Derek is awake. Would he please turn Jasmine over and give us what we both need?" I kissed him. He kissed me back. He wrapped his arms around me and we moved together. Then he held me closely. It wasn't rough or fast. He moved the way I liked, but he stopped just before I reached the peak. Usually, our morning time was nice, but the evening ones were more playful. Not this time. Was he trying to show me something I didn't know, and I didn't care? Later, I felt Dave get out of bed and saw him start dressing for work. I hoped he would stay with me longer. Looking down, he said things had not gone well yesterday. He had to go finish work on a trial setup. I knew his job involved testing how to fit racks in ambulances before the medical tools arrived. When he left the room, Jasmine took off the wig and became Mary again. I got dressed quickly and went downstairs. I offered to make breakfast and coffee. Dave said no, politely and quietly. I thought he might be feeling awkward and just wanted to leave. Around noon, I sent Dave a text. "You're very busy. Can I make dinner for us both? Something simple?" He replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Now I had to decide what to cook. Not a roast or his favorite liver and bacon. Pie! Steak pie with potatoes, vegetables, and gravy. I needed to go to the store for the pie and check if we had enough beer. Dave messaged me again, saying he'd be home around 7. We ate dinner together and I asked, "How's it going? A bit rough?" "Yes," he said. "Want to talk about it?" I asked quietly. We finished eating by then. "I think I've figured it out, but we'll know more tomorrow when we try installing it on the Chinook," Dave said. A Chinook is a big military helicopter used by the Royal Air Force for carrying people and helping with medical emergencies. Dave went on, "I'm worried about electronic interference. All the medical devices use Wi-Fi and Bluetooth to work, and we're not sure how that will affect the helicopter's systems. They want us to put the equipment under the part where the engine controls are. I think we've planned well, but it still worries me. Next week won't be just a trial installation, but also a full test of how the systems work together. All electronic devices using alternating current send out radio waves, which can affect other nearby electronics. It's like hearing a conversation you're not supposed to hear. This is called electromagnetic interference. I wasn't an expert on this, but I knew some from working at Bright's Electronics. Dave designs the inside of ambulances and air ambulances, but military helicopters are very different. The equipment in an air ambulance for normal use is very different from what you need in a battle zone. The helicopter has military gear like radar and warning systems, self-protection systems, and electronic flight and engine controls. We had similar equipment in tanks, and those caused similar problems. I know a bit about this. Do you want to tell me what's worrying you? I asked. Dave nodded and brought over his computer while I cleaned up the dinner plates. He showed me drawings of how he tried to reduce interference. We talked about electrical connections, resistance, shielding, power levels, frequencies, and the distances between the medical devices and the helicopter's electronics. I wasn't an expert, but it seemed like he had done everything right. We talked late into the evening. I even grabbed a pencil and paper and drew some diagrams to help explain things. I did some calculations. Everything looked good, but Dave still seemed uneasy. I suggested a few ideas to make things better if they found problems during the tests. He said he would probably be busy most of next week because after they installed everything, they were going to do system tests. Basically, they would turn on all the helicopter systems, then all the medical devices, and move them around in the cabin to see if anything affected the helicopter's controls. This was a common way to test tanks, but tanks don't fly. He assured me he wouldn't be flying in the helicopter during the tests. I sat next to him as we talked. It felt good, really good. We even shared a couple of beers while we talked. It was almost 11 when we finished. Dave thanked me with a hug and a kiss on the cheek. I went to bed and cried a lot. Talking with him reminded me of the project that caused me so much trouble. During the trip home and over the weekend, I kept thinking about the anti-drone project I ended up managing at Bright's Electronics. I missed working with Dave, the comfort, and the talks we had. Dave had to leave early the next morning to drive to the RAF base, about the same time I normally left. I got up to have breakfast with him. I wanted to be there when he left and show support. Dave was much happier at breakfast. For the first time since I got back, I watched him drive off like we used to every day for each other. I waved until he reached the end of the road. I went back inside, tears in my eyes, thinking about what I had lost because of my mistakes. Then I knew that was selfish. I should think about Dave, not just myself. As I walked back to the house, I decided to pull myself out of my sadness and focus on the future. I had a job, and I was living in the same house as Dave. I wouldn't forget the mistakes I made, especially cheating on him. If I got him back, I promised myself I would never do that again. Around 2 in the afternoon, I got a message from Dave saying he would be late. I asked if I could bring him something to eat and how things were going. He answered, "Yes, please. So. He didn't say what time he would be home. I decided to make a meal that could stay warm in a pot, like chili or stew. On my way home, I stopped at the supermarket and bought what I needed. Dave came home just after 8. He looked tired again. I had already eaten, but his place was set and something warm was on the stove. We talked a little about how things were going. He went to bed early. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday were much like Monday. But on Thursday, he asked me to eat with him. We talked, and he seemed to get happier as the week went on. I thought things must be going well. On Friday, Dave was home when I arrived. Something smelled nice. The table was set not with our best dishes, but there was a bottle of wine waiting for me. "What's all this about?" I asked. "It's all done," he said. "It was a great success. Just the report left to write, but some of the ideas you gave me helped. So this is just a little thank you." He looked serious for a moment and added, "This is David and Mary, not Jasmine and Derek," I said with a smile. "Thank you, kind sir, but can Derek and Jasmine play later?" "I'm not sure that's a good idea. I'd like to, but it feels risky," he answered. Then he caught himself and gave a small smile. "But maybe you like the risk anyway." He was right. "Yes, but only if you feel completely okay with it. It has to be mutual," I said. "I'm not sure yet. Let's see how dinner goes first," he replied. My plan was working. I didn't have a strict timeline except to get back into his heart before someone else did. With the hours he worked, there wasn't much time for hanging out with anyone but me. I had Jasmine as a quiet advantage. The date that really mattered was the final day of the divorce. I had plans for the weekend after that. I had 2 ways to reach my goal. One was with Jasmine, gently bringing back closeness. The other was to make him feel comfortable with Mary again. That would be the hardest part, besides rebuilding trust. It could take years, but I was willing to try. As Mary sat down for dinner, Jasmine started to prepare. It didn't take much, just a little. Jasmine walked down the stairs wearing a blonde wig and clothes that caught attention. We lay next to each other. Jasmine rested on his shoulder. A piece of blonde hair fell across my face. I moved it away, and he saw me do it. While he was looking, I quietly said, "Can Jasmine ask a favor?" He nodded. "When you accidentally put your hand over my nose in the conservatory, I liked it. Would you mind doing that again? Not so I can't breathe, just a little." He looked a bit puzzled, so I explained more. You know I tell my physiotherapist everything? Well, I told her about that, and she said it's part of my need for excitement, especially when I feel a bit restricted. But she warned me to only do it with someone I truly trust. And even though I've hurt you before, I trust no one in this world as much as you. So maybe Jasmine could ask you to do that again? He just smiled and said, Are you hoping Jasmine and Derek will play again? Yes, whenever you're ready, I said, and left it there for the moment. We fell asleep. I had been at my new job for a couple of weeks when the company induction course came up. I told David it was a 3-day course with 2 nights away to visit other factories. I promised to let him know when I would be home. I mentioned the other factories were in the north. I didn't lie, just didn't say everything. If he had asked more, I would have told him the details. The course started on Wednesday. On Tuesday evening, I went to see my mom and dad. I needed to ask Mom for a favor. The last time I saw Dave was briefly on Tuesday morning. I had made dinner on Monday evening, and we sat quietly watching TV. Mine was still broken. I could have fixed it by pushing the connector back on the board, but I wanted him to miss me the cooking, being there, feeling comfortable like we were before I messed up. I knew he was going out Friday evening to meet his friends. It had been a usual thing for years, even more since. Well, you know when. He planned to leave around 6. I got home from my course just before that. I was glad I made it back before he left. When he went out, I said, I missed you. Then I kissed his cheek. It was true. I really missed him. When he went out for a drink with his friends, that was okay. They talked about work, rugby, golf, and other stuff. It felt like things were normal again. I kept an eye on his phone. When he was on his way back, I grabbed a beer from the fridge and had it ready for him. He probably didn't need it, but I wanted to make him feel welcome. He looked at the beer and then at me. Are you trying to get me to drink so I'll come back to bed? He asked, smiling. I raised my voice just a little, pretending to be serious. Yes, I want to get you back to bed. I want to show you how much I love you. But not when you're drunk. That wouldn't be right. He came over and kissed my cheek softly. Thank you, he said. Then he sat down and turned on the TV. There wasn't much on. He asked how the course had gone. I told him it was interesting. Looking at me, he said, I see you're wearing a ring. Did something happen I don't know about? Was the course that great? It had its moments, I answered quietly. I couldn't wear my wedding or engagement rings anymore. After he had pointed out to me that the rings I loved, the ones David gave me, were no longer the same to me after I betrayed us. I kept them, but I couldn't wear them again. I explained that I didn't want to go to the course without any rings on. I was still married and didn't want to deal with unwanted attention. I waited for him to say something, but he didn't. So I told him I went to my mom to borrow some rings. My dad lent me his old wedding ring since he couldn't wear it anymore. My mother warned me sternly, if that ring ever touches anyone else's hand but David's, you will never be welcome in this house again. I didn't need the warning. I never wanted to hurt anyone again. Did you get any unwanted attention during your nights away? He asked. I told him what happened. At the induction, we all had to share a short history about ourselves. I said where I came from, what I had done before. I wanted to learn new skills. I said I was married, but I didn't say that a divorce was coming soon. Yes, I admitted quietly. Someone did try to talk to me once. Most men treated me like an equal, but I often had to say, go away. I'm married and I don't cheat. I looked down and said, I felt very guilty when I said that. Some men warned him to back off. He was very full of himself and rude. I noticed he wore a white band on his ring finger. After the warning, I watched him carefully. He started paying attention to another woman who wore a wedding ring. The next morning, I saw her at breakfast. Without saying who I was, I sat next to her and said, That's very risky. She frowned and looked at me. Sleeping with a man in the same company as you is dangerous. He may work in another part of the company, but your husband will find out. What will you do then?" She smiled and said, "Yes, it's risky, but that's part of the fun." I told her it was better to learn from other people's mistakes. That way, you avoid pain. She looked at me and asked, "Have you done this?" I did not answer. I just looked her in the eyes. "Oh no," she said. "Did it hurt?" I said, "More than you can imagine, and not just me." I didn't stop. I wanted her to understand some of the problems she might face if she stayed on this path. I told her, "There are a few ways this can end. You said you are married with 2 children. If your husband finds out, he will leave you. He will blame you, and you will have to take care of the children on your own. You see, this man is likely to brag about being with you." You look shocked. I continued. "Or you might feel guilty and tell your husband it was a one-time mistake when you were upset. I don't know your husband, but how do you think he will take it? If you don't protect yourself, you could get pregnant or sick. Is it worth it? This is about your life and your husband's and children's lives, too." Another way is that you might try to hide it all. But when the guilt grows, your home life will change. Your husband will notice. And if you act differently, he might get suspicious and find out the truth. Is all this pain worth one night of fun? He might not even be very good for you anyway. He might be selfish and careless. She told me she got caught up in the moment. He was paying attention to her and made her feel special. For a short time, she wasn't thinking about being a mother, a wife, or a worker with many duties. But then I think she realized what she was about to do and what she could lose. She hadn't thought about the ending, only the fun. Just then, lover boy came and sat next to her. He quietly put his hand on her leg. She pushed it away, looked at him, and told him never to speak to her again. She stood up and left, leaving her breakfast unfinished. The rumor was that he later tried to get close to one of the single girls who was already in a relationship. She told someone, and he received an official warning. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. It was a hard story to share, and it made me think about my own struggles. Dave came over and sat beside me. He gently wiped my tear away. "I think you're very brave to share that with someone you don't know. Do you know who she is? Can you keep in touch with her?" I nodded. "I will watch out for her. She didn't make the same mistake as me, but it was for a similar reason. My mistake was much worse, and I can't keep saying it, but you know what I mean." He squeezed my hand and then leaned back. "Tell me more about what you learned." It was good that he changed the subject. I felt some relief. I told him about the company's work. He already knew some, but I shared more details. I explained that some electronics were made in hundreds, not thousands, since you don't make lots of big tanks. But other parts of the company made electronics for cars. They wanted those in batches of about 1,000, arriving just when needed. It was in these parts that they were having problems with how well things worked. On Saturday, I went to see my parents and gave Dad's ring back. I told them what happened and about the talks David and I had after I got home. My dad walked me out to my car. "You have a plan, don't you?" he asked. I smiled a little and nodded. "He will never marry you? You know that?" I nodded again. "I would be happy just to be Mrs. Burroughs living with Mr. Mitchell under the same roof as husband and wife." "Is that what you want?" "That would be good enough, Dad," I said. Dad kissed my cheek and said, "Good luck. Don't hurt him again. It wouldn't be good for him." "I won't, Dad. I promise," I answered. That evening, while watching TV, I made my next move. We were sitting on the sofa when I said to David, "Do you remember how we got into this tying up thing?" "Yeah, I do. Watching Heart to Heart. Wasn't it?" "Yep, that's it. Stephanie Powers played Jennifer Hart. She was tied up with her hands in front, and I said that was silly because she could get free easily. You said it would be harder than it looked. So, I grabbed one of your ties and told you to prove it. You used my rugby club tie. Sorry, I thought it was your old school tie. They have the same colors, but you cheated. You tied my hands in front but put the knot under so I couldn't reach it with my teeth. I went to the kitchen and tried to get something to help me free myself. You stopped me. David laughed. What did you expect? Those ties cost a lot. I didn't expect what you did next. Well, I had to teach you a lesson. He grinned. Not like that, though you tied my hands behind my back. I wasn't going to get free then, not even with a knife. But what you did after that wasn't fair at all. I saw David smile and say, I didn't hear you complain. It felt like relief. I couldn't stop you from slowly unbuttoning my blouse, teasing me as you did it. You know I like when you touch me there. I couldn't shout, because the kids were asleep upstairs. When you pulled my clothes down and got close to me, a small part of me worried about how I smelled or tasted. But that night, I had no control. I felt like I was in a dream. You could have just said stop, David said quietly. I smiled at him. But I didn't want to stop. I knew you wouldn't cross the line. You could have done anything, even that. I stopped for a moment. For the first time, I felt totally free. I knew it would end, but for those moments, I wasn't a mother, wife, worker, or daughter. I had no worries because I knew you were there with me and would treat me well. You would never hurt me. All I had to do was relax and enjoy. You would never do that without me saying yes. It sounds strange now, but that's how it was the first time. David spoke seriously. But you don't like that. Why would I do it to you? He laughed a little. Besides, it wasn't my birthday. I looked down, feeling a little shy. That first time was amazing. Not that the others weren't, but that first time opened the door to many new things we hadn't even thought of before. Our life together was never boring, was it? I noticed how he looked, and he reached out. Our life was never boring. Always busy, but never dull. The unspoken word, until, stayed in the air. This wasn't how I wanted the talk to go. I wanted to look ahead, but maybe we needed to remember the past. My dear, I always knew I could trust you in everything we did, not just in the bedroom. I finished the sentence that hung between us. Until I made mistakes. It's all my fault, not yours. I thought you would trust my love for you. My biggest mistake was agreeing with Weatherby and Sophie. My second biggest mistake was not seeing things from your side. Or maybe that was the first mistake, because if I had, I wouldn't have done it. Sorry, I keep going on about it. But what I did hurt you more than I ever thought it would, and I can't explain it well enough. But I want to try to make it right, if you'll let me. That wasn't how I hoped the talk would go. I wanted it to end with us close again, like the very first night. But things didn't go that way. David stood up, gently touched my hair, and said softly, It's been a long few days. I'm going to bed. I hoped after I told him how I felt, he would ask me, Mary, to stay with him. Instead, he said, I'll see you in the morning, Pooh, and walked upstairs. I waited until he was in his room. Then I cried. I had messed up again, but I wasn't ready to give up. The next morning, as I held my cup of tea, I looked across the kitchen table at David. David, if Mary can't make it better, can Jasmine? I know you miss some of the things we used to do. Your pants gave you away last night when we talked, and we haven't done that for a long time. I also know it's one of your favorites. What do you suggest? He asked. I smiled, seeing a chance. Give me until noon. I'll come back with a plan we will both like. I already had an idea, but I wanted to give him time to think. After he finished working in the garage, I met him and said, Please stay in your room from 7 to 8, then come to the conservatory. Don't turn on any lights. While he worked, I brought some old things from his room. I hoped he didn't notice to keep it a surprise. It got dark around 6 with a half moon in the sky. The weather was cloudy and a little rainy, so there was just enough light to see shapes. David came into the conservatory right on time. There stood Jasmine, dressed up in a purple satin corset that shaped her body nicely. Stockings, tall leather boots, a leather choker, and long leather gloves. Her hair and makeup looked just the way David liked it. Her hands were gently held above her head by soft handcuffs attached to a beam. Around her neck hung a blindfold and her favorite gag, with the key on a chain. On David's chair was a small collection of some toys from before. David looked surprised, his mouth open. It had been months since they had shared moments like this, and I had missed it. Both Mary and Jasmine had worn things like this before, but never in a place where others might see. "Well?" I asked softly, not sure how much he could see. I could see him clearly, and I hoped he could see me. "Beautiful," he said quietly. "Are you sure you want to keep going?" "Absolutely. The safety word is our usual one, or hum the national anthem, okay?" "Yes." He stepped closer and gently pulled me toward him. His lips met mine softly. I opened my mouth a little, letting him in. His hand moved down and freed me from my tight clothes. He softly touched me where I liked it. I could tell he cared. Then he moved his hand lower, touching me gently. I shivered, nearly losing my balance. He was patient, moving with my reactions. "Deeper," I whispered. "Not yet," he said quietly. Suddenly he knelt down. I didn't notice he had taken off his clothes. He held my knees and slowly moved my legs apart. I heard the soft sounds of leather. I felt his warm breath close to me, then a light touch. I wanted more and moved closer with a soft sound. "Oops! I forgot," he said, and I felt him standing again. I opened my eyes as I saw him holding something I knew. I opened my mouth without a word, letting it fit inside. He then put a blindfold on me. I liked the smell of the leather. "Back on his knees," he continued, moving his fingers gently as his mouth followed. It was soft and careful, making me feel very close. Just when I was about to lose control, he stopped and pulled away. He liked to play like that, teasing me. Twice he let me get close but didn't let me go over. Then he stood up, kissed my nose, and turned me around to face outside. He took off the blindfold so I could see our reflection. It was a quiet, special moment. He wrapped his arms around me and pulled me close. I knew what was next from before. We moved together, slowly and carefully. His hands found the places I liked, and I enjoyed every moment. Suddenly, the backyard and conservatory lit up brightly. I heard him whisper, "Jess." It was the neighbor's cat, coming through the garden as it often did. I realized how visible we were. Still, I moved with him as he whispered, "Don't worry. People will think it's Jasmine, not Mary. Most know we're separating. They will think him seeing someone wild." But he didn't speed up. He moved carefully. It would take 2 or 3 minutes before the light went out. The chance of being found, the feeling, even if people didn't think it was me, was very strong. When the lights went out, I saw David's hand moving toward my face. My eyes weren't used to the dark, yet when I felt his thumb and finger close over my nose, I could just breathe a little around the gag. David started moving faster. I pushed back. My eyes closed. I could feel myself getting close. I was about to breathe in when David's hand pressed harder over the gag and stopped me from breathing. I screamed with the little air I had left as I reached the peak. My ears rang, and I saw bright lights. The next thing I knew, I was waking up on our sofa. David was next to me. It was still dark. I noticed I wasn't wearing my boots, and my wig was gone. I still had my corset and gloves on. Soon I realized my hands were tied behind my back. The blanket that usually lay over the back of the sofa was now over us. I had to go to the bathroom very badly. I gently bit David's ear to wake him up, and he startled. "What's wrong?" "I need the bathroom, but it's hard like this." I rattled the ties on my wrists. "Why am I tied?" Because I'm tired and don't trust you not to cause trouble, he said. I smiled. I still have my mouth, and I still have the gag, he said. If we're going to do this, can I have ropes instead of these? They're uncomfortable. He untied me quickly, and I ran to the bathroom. He went to get some ropes from the conservatory. I took off my gloves and corset. They had been very tight. When he returned, I turned away and put my hands behind my back with my wrists crossed. David tied them fast. The ropes felt softer and more comfortable. We lay back on the sofa. The blanket was still warm from our bodies. I rested my head on David's shoulder. The sun was up when I heard the front door open. The only other people with keys were Julie and Jack. Jack stood in the doorway, looking surprised. I sat up but couldn't cover myself because my hands were still tied behind my back. At least our son couldn't see that. And the blanket didn't fall down. David held it in place. "Jack," David said softly, "keep this to yourself." "Absolutely, Dad," Jack said. "I'm just going to see Nanny and Granddad. I'll be back in an hour," he smiled. "Or do you need me longer?" Then he left. Jack came back just after 10, then went out to meet his friends. He said he would be back for dinner. I made corned beef stovies, Jack's favorite, always best with BBQ sauce. He told us about his training, his new friends in the RAF, a girl he liked, and that he had been on 2 dates so far. He mentioned he told Nan and Granddad that he found us unable to help, but didn't say more. He told us that his Nan just smiled and said, "Good." Granddad looked confused. Jack asked a question that had probably been on his mind for a while. "Look, are you two together again?" "It's complicated," he said. "Your dad is still going to divorce me, but I think we can work something out. What you saw was part of that." "Sorry you had to see it," Jack laughed. "Yeah, you don't expect your parents to be like that, but I guess you do or Julie and I wouldn't be here. Next time I'll call ahead or you could use a bedroom." Jack stood up to get more tea. I leaned over to David and whispered, "Or the conservatory." David blushed. Hopefully, Jack didn't notice his father's red face when he came back. David came home about 2 weeks after finishing the Chinook report and told me they had a new project. This time, it was for the Royal Navy's Merlin heavy-lift helicopter. He could understand a lot of the design and would use what I had told him for the interference part. Because of the Chinook project, they had experience and could easily make racks for the equipment. Most of the medical gear was the same. The job took just over a month. David had to drive to the Royal Navy base down in the Southwest, and he was gone for almost a week. Mary had dinner ready for him, but Jasmine was happy to see him when he got home. We settled into a routine. On weekends, I slept in our bed. During the week, sometimes I stayed with Jasmine, but most of the time, I stayed with Mary. Things were moving in the right direction. I was in his life, and I could see he was starting to open up to me. But it would take more time and trust before he fully let me in. That was okay. Trust takes time, sometimes years. I was ready to be patient. It felt good to be where we were. I had a plan. There were still a few weeks before the divorce was final, and that was when I wanted to make the big change. When I got home one day, I saw Tony's car outside. He had been visiting a lot lately. As I walked in, I heard David say, "Good job finding him." The two of them paused when I came into the room and started talking about golf. It felt like they were trying to change the subject. I talked with Tony, not his wife, Sophie. Tony and Sophie had made up. Sophie wanted to keep their open marriage, but Tony didn't. Sophie threatened to get a divorce, but after what she told me, I knew she was bluffing. I told Tony what she said to me, and he showed her he wasn't afraid. He even brought her a divorce paper. She backed down right away. David and I gave Tony some ideas on how he could keep their relationship exciting without other people. Tony told us that if Sophie hadn't backed down, he was ready to go through with the divorce. He'd had enough. Later that evening, David told me he was going to Shrewsbury the next weekend to play rugby with Tony. Tony did not play rugby, but he was part of the club. They had never gone away for rugby before. When David came back late Sunday, he was too tired to spend time with Mary or Jasmine. He said he had been busy and that he and Tony had drunk too much while celebrating. I thought that was strange since they didn't win the match. On Monday, I got a call from Mr. Weatherby Sr. He said Claude had been hurt near where he lived in North Wales. I knew Dave had gone to Shrewsbury with the rugby team, and Tony went too. That was near North Wales. When I asked Dave about it, he only said, "Tony and I have alibis. We were with friends at rugby all weekend." Then he walked away. I thought to myself that those friends would always stand up for each other. Things settled down after that. David and I were comfortable with each other. I would spend weekends in his room, and sometimes David would start close moments between us. I felt it was a good step forward. We had talked about our thrill-seeking habits. I gently suggested trying outdoor activities like Derek and Jasmine did. He said no, maybe because it was winter. Still, I believed we could find something to satisfy our need for excitement. It was just over a week before the divorce was final when my mom called me. David was on his way home and wouldn't be back for 20 minutes, so I had a little time to talk. Mom asked, "Hello, sweetie, how are things going with your plan?" I replied, "Okay, I think. Things are moving along." "So your plan is working?" she asked. I laughed a little. "Oh, you mean the plan to get back into David's heart, that one?" She giggled. "Yes, that one. I'm getting there. Sometimes it's been hard. I think I am fixing the damage I caused, but I need more time." "Do you think he will stop the divorce?" Mom asked. "No, Mom, and I think neither should he. I made a mistake. He warned me and promised he would divorce me if I did that. I don't want to make him go back on his word. I think this could be a fresh start for us. I have a plan, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Well, I hope your plan works. Just keep us updated," she said, with another soft giggle. "Not the private details, of course," I replied. We said goodbye. Then I turned and saw David. He looked very angry. "What do you mean by the plan to get back into David's heart?" He must have heard everything I said to my mom. With all the laughing, it sounded like a joke, but it wasn't. It was something serious to me. David looked at me with a serious expression. "How much of this is just a trick to get you back into my life?" I knew his voice was cold. It was not a good feeling. "Please sit down, I can explain." I reached out to him. He let me guide him to the sitting room. I helped him sit on the sofa, then knelt in front of him and held his hands. I had practiced this moment because I knew he might figure out what I was doing, and I would have to explain myself. "My love, this might sound rehearsed because it is. And if I get this wrong, you might leave me, and you would have every right to." I straightened up on my knees and looked him in the face. "I love you. I always have. But I made a big mistake, a huge mistake. I hurt the person I care about most. I lost your trust, didn't treat you with respect, ignored you, didn't believe your words, and most of all, I hurt you deeply. I needed to heal the pain I caused. I wanted to be the one who fixed what I broke. The only way I knew was to stay with you and help you heal in every way I could. It is not just about being close. It's about living together, sharing life, being part of a family. So yes, this was planned, but my reasons were always honest even if some of the ways I tried to help you were not perfect. I have never lied to you. Maybe sometimes I didn't tell the whole truth, and that's my fault. But my goal was to heal your heart. And until now, I believe I have come a long way toward that." I paused. I wanted to help you become whole again. What I wanted to say next was risky, something I didn't like to face. "Since you let me move back, have I given you any reason to doubt me? Have I lied or failed to do everything I could to help you?" "Yes. I may have bent some rules about living here, but you never complained. Please, just think about it. He leaned back on the sofa and pulled his hands from mine. You're right. I do need to think about this. Just then, the timer went off. I had put pizzas in the oven for dinner. He followed me to the kitchen and sat down. I sliced the pizzas and put a plate in front of him. He got up, brought a good bottle of wine and 2 glasses, and pulled a bottle of BBQ sauce from the fridge. I knew he was trying to annoy me. The strong taste of the sauce would cover the wine's flavors. Why use good wine? There was cheaper red wine on the rack. I was sure he did it just to tease me. He poured us both a glass. We didn't talk. When he finished his pizza, he stood up and said, I need to think. I'm going to the club. Then he walked out. I finished my dinner, cleared the table, took the wine into the lounge, and turned on the TV. But I didn't really watch it. I wanted something to take my mind off things. I needed to think. But it wasn't easy. David had been gone for about 2 hours. Well, really, 1 hour and 47 minutes exactly. When he came back from the club with his friends, he didn't look drunk at all. In fact, he looked very clear-headed. He sat on the sofa and quickly changed the TV channel without asking, which was unusual for him. I said softly, I was watching that. David looked at me. Well, your TV works now. You can always watch it in your room. I was surprised. He kept talking. The circuit board connector was loose. I thought you might have checked that after the fuse blew with your background. Oh, and the screws on the back cover were loose, like I told you before. Loose screws cause problems. He smiled. My face turned red. How much did he really know? I asked. How much do you know? Still smiling, he said. Not your detailed plans, just what you're trying to do. When did you find out? I asked. Oh, about a week after the first conservatory problem, and when your TV broke, he said, pausing. Your mom said something without meaning to. What? She said she wouldn't tell anyone. I thought for a moment and looked at him sharply. You've known for months. Your mom didn't say much, he said. She just mentioned that you would do almost anything to make things right with me and get back into my heart. I saw how you used Jasmine, and I noticed the little things you did. I needed that, and it helped me. I appreciated it. I put 2 and 2 together. Did I get it right? I just nodded. You let me make a fool of myself? I asked. Then I had a thought. Why did you go to the club? Just to give you time to think, to stew over things, he said. Did you? Yes, you jerk. I was worried about how much you knew and if I ruined my plans. He said, Not really. I was spending time with Jasmine, and I never pushed for that. I was happy with you. You helped me. So why not? Best of both worlds. And you showed you trusted me. I tied you up, and I covered your mouth and nose for a moment. I could have hurt you for what you did. But you trusted me, and I had to show some trust back. I looked at him and said quietly, Summer said I needed to show you I trusted you as a step to getting you to trust me. Just a small step. Weren't you worried? He asked. No, because I didn't believe you would really hurt me. Then he stopped smiling and said something that made me uneasy. You didn't have to get back into my heart. You never left it, but the trust is gone, and it will take a long time to forgive the pain you caused. I expected that. You let me do all those things for you? And just now, you let me tell you everything? Come on, you enjoyed it, the planning, figuring things out, being Jasmine, and the risk, he said quietly. Besides, telling the truth is good for you. Even though you tried hard, the divorce is still happening, and no matter what, I will never marry you again. It's about trust. Then he smiled, tilted his head, and said with a smile, The divorce will be final in 2 weeks. What are your plans now that you know I won't stop it? Should I take a day off work to celebrate or get a van for your stuff? He was so sure of himself. After everything, he pretty much knew all along. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I jumped at him, pushed him back on the sofa, and sat on his lap, hitting his chest with my small fists while shouting at him. Tears fell on his shirt. He reached up, pulled me close, wrapped his arms around me, and whispered in my ear, "I love you." I had wanted to hear those words for so long. He kept talking. "I wanted to see how far you would go to get back with me." I laughed through my tears. Almost anything except hurting someone, and even that might be negotiable. He pushed me off, stood up, and held out his hand, still smiling. I took it. That night, David and I shared a special moment. The next morning he asked, "Need the van?" "No. Just keep Saturday night free." "There will be rules," he said, then went to wash both cars. My papers arrived Tuesday, his on Thursday. We were both single now. I had already reserved a quiet booth at Mario's restaurant. On Saturday night, I got ready in Julie's room. I wore sandals with small heels, red nail polish showing through my stockings. The burgundy dress I had bought for David 6 months ago had a side split that showed my stocking top when I walked. My hair and makeup were just how I knew he liked. I knew he was waiting downstairs, so I was a little late on purpose. I walked down the stairs slowly, making sure he could see the dress split. He looked amazing in a suit that might have been new. I hoped for good things. The taxi arrived, and David opened our front door for me as we left the house, then held the taxi door such a gentleman. It was the first time in months he'd acted like that, and the first time in 6 months we had been out as a couple. David helped me out of the taxi, and the maitre d' opened the restaurant door and showed us to our booth. We finished the main course and started the second bottle of wine when I said, "David, you have something important to say, don't you?" "Yes," he said. "I want you fully back in my life, including being close. But I have some conditions. I'll tell you what they are, and if you don't agree, I will help you move out." He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket and placed it on the table facing me so I could read. "No other men. If you even dance with another man from now on, you have to leave." That would be a problem for me. I hadn't told David, but in 3 weeks there was a company party. I would have to at least talk with other workers and managers. I might even have to dance. I thought about how David would feel. I had been unfaithful with someone from my old company's management, and that still hurt him. I raised my hand, and he nodded for me to speak. I told him about the party and the possible problems. "Can we agree on something? I won't dance with anyone unless you are there and say it's okay." He thought for a moment. "Yes, that sounds fair." On money, he said I would pay half the mortgage, but just like rent, and I would not own part of the house. We would have a shared fund for food and household things. I would also pay half the utility bills plus a little extra. That extra money would go into a fund he called the Holiday House Repair Fund. When the mortgage was paid off, the money for it would go into that fund too. I asked if the holiday fund was for both of us. He smiled, nodded, and said, "Together." That made me happy. He was thinking about holidays for both of us. He wanted this to last for the long term as long as I didn't mess up. He was still paying me for the house, so money was still moving between us. The rest was about who did what in the house. It was almost the same as before I caused problems, but now we each paid our own way. He was making the break easier. I understood why. There was no point in saying he didn't need to. Time would show him otherwise. The main thing was, I moved all my clothes back into our bedroom and started sleeping there again. A waiter came over and asked if we wanted dessert. I asked to borrow their pen. He gave me a pen and went to get dessert menus. I didn't really need the menus, but I signed the paper and circled the word "our" in David's last sentence. After we ordered dessert, David looked at the waiter and said, "We will have a bottle of champagne, please." The waiter smiled. "Are we celebrating, sir?" "Yes, we are our divorce." We ordered strawberries with cream, and I moved to sit next to him in the booth. We enjoyed the dessert together. When our champagne was finished, I took his hand and said, "Miss Burrows would like to invite Mr. Mitchell home tonight. He smiled. I felt like he was testing me. I had been with the company for about 9 months and was offered a promotion. My boss, who led production and assembly, was retiring. I was offered his job. With David's help, I had fixed the problems with reliability. Managing production runs wasn't really my thing, and it wasn't David's either. But he saw things differently. One day, I took him for a walk around the factory. He pointed out that some of the circuit boards were not coming off the machine correctly. I picked up a few and saw that they didn't work right. The people on the floor putting the boards together were very busy and didn't have time to look into the problem. Their job was just to make as many boards as they could. After making a small change, the number of bad boards went down to a good level. This helped me get promoted. The company had a Guy Fawkes party instead of a Christmas party. It was cheaper to rent the hotel then. At the party, they planned to announce that I got the job. David wanted to come with me because he had helped find the problem. I told the managers that David helped me, but he had to leave to fix a broken ambulance. He was the only one who could help. He likes working with his hands anyway. On Saturday night in town, there are always many calls for ambulances. He said he would come as soon as he could. At the party, I talked with Judy. She was going to take my place as production manager. We became good friends since I started working. Some other people from work were there too. Then one of the senior managers asked me to dance. I said no. My workmates teased me because people were saying I was a star for fixing the problem. They told me I should take the chance to dance with the managers. David never minded that I danced with management at the first big party we went to. When I was asked to dance, he would give me a small nod or shake his head quietly. Judy said it was okay to dance, but I told them David always got the first dance. They thought that was sweet. While we were talking, one of the girls looked behind me and then at me, saying, "Incoming." I hoped it was David. I turned and saw it was the area manager. He was a little younger than me, about 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, and very handsome. He seemed friendly when I met him before. He had a nice, confident way about him. He looked at the people by me, didn't ask, and just held out his hand. I thought that was a bit bold. David was not here, so I could say no without trouble. But I was not tempted. "I'm sorry," I said. "I only dance with my boyfriend. When he comes, you can ask him, but until then, I have to say no." I'm sure he wouldn't mind. It's just a quick dance. There's a slow song coming up. It would be nice. "I'm sorry," I said again. "You must be hard of hearing." I said no. He nodded and walked away. That's when Judy said to me, "Boyfriend, I thought you two were married or at least engaged." "You act like a married couple," I said, wanting to add a little mystery to the night. "Oh, we were married, but now we're just boyfriend and girlfriend," he replied. It was my turn to get drinks, so I walked over to the bar. That's when I saw David standing alone in the corner with a half-empty beer glass. How long had he been watching? I went over and gave him a quick kiss. I told him I was getting drinks for Judy and my co-workers and asked if he could help. As we walked to the bar, I asked, "How long have you been standing here?" "Oh, long enough. That guy who just talked to you was pretty good looking." "Yeah, but he's not you, and I don't plan to break any promises I made to you." "Were you tempted? A tall, smart, handsome man like that?" "No, not really." I smiled and touched his arm. "It's not worth risking a lifetime with you just for a few moments of fun." "All right, let's go see what questions Judy has for you." He laughed. David and I shared a small laugh. We left Judy and my co-workers confused. I felt like I had passed a test, not only by refusing to dance, but also by being honest that I wasn't tempted. Later, on the way home, David teased me playfully. I smiled at the light-hearted moment as we sat quietly in the taxi. The next day, we slept in, enjoying the calm morning together. Although it had taken longer than we expected, our lives slowly found a new rhythm. We planned small adventures to keep things exciting. I even bought a new wig. It was bright red and fun. We were careful with how we used it, but it made things feel fresh and lively. Epilogue. David. We had been living together for almost 3 years, and most people were okay with it. Then things almost fell apart. Mary had planned a birthday party for me at the rugby club. It was supposed to be simple, just family and friends. Everything seemed fine at first. We walked around, talking to people, but I felt uneasy. There were too many smiles, too many knowing looks. It was February 29th, a day when, by tradition, women could ask men to marry them. I had a feeling something was coming, and I knew she wouldn't like my answer. It happened around 10:30. She pulled me to the middle of the dance floor. She knelt down, and her father gave her a small box. Looking up at me, she said, "I love you. I know I made mistakes. We've had good times these last 3 years. I want to start over. Would you?" I had guessed this might happen. I wanted to make it as gentle as I could. I knelt down in front of her. She stopped talking, and everyone looked surprised. I spoke loudly enough for all to hear. "Please don't do this. I love you." Then I lowered my voice for those near me. I said I would always love you, and I will. But if you had asked me this with only our parents and the kids, I might have said yes. Not with all the family and friends here. I feel like you're embarrassing me in front of them. You may not see it that way, but I do. I know you want to show your love and make things right. I stood up and walked toward the exit. Outside, I took out my phone. I couldn't drive like this. The clubhouse was very quiet. Everyone must have been shocked. They all thought I would say yes. We looked like a married couple, acted like one. So why would I say no? But they didn't know what I was feeling. Suddenly, she came out like a whirlwind and threw herself at me. "Please don't push me away. I love you. I wanted to show everyone how much. I want to spend my life with you. Watch our grandchildren grow." I gently moved her arms from my neck. Holding her shoulders, I said no to marriage, not to us. The choice is yours. I love you, but I won't marry you. I like things how they are. You need to accept that or move on. A car horn honked. "My taxi is here. I have to go." She grabbed my hand, lifted it, and kissed the back. Tilting her head softly, she asked, "You forgive me, but you haven't forgotten?" I just smiled. She knelt again, took my hand, looked up, and said, "I'm sorry for making another mistake. You say you love me? Please, come back inside. I'll say something that shows you're not a bad person. Then we'll go home." I told the taxi driver to wait. We would get another later. Mary took my hand and led me inside. The noise there was quiet now. At the door, she breathed deeply. We stood there for almost a minute. I saw the worry on her face. She looked up at me and smiled. "Please," she said softly. Taking my hand, she led me inside. I heard her say, "Please turn the music off." The room fell quiet. She took a deep breath and stood up straight. "My family and friends, I'm sorry you had to see all that. Many of you know what I planned tonight. Thank you for your support. But I, the one standing here, made a mistake. My dear one here beside me, the love of my life, has forgiven what I did to him, but he hasn't forgotten. I was wrong to think he would. I was wrong to invite you all to this moment that he sees as a trick. How could he say no to a proposal on February 29th in front of everyone? Well, guess what? He did. He is so strong. I believe he has forgiven me, but he will never forget the hurt I caused, and so he will never marry me." She looked at me, tears running down her face. "Please, I love you. I made another foolish mistake. I don't want to lose you. This is my fault. Do we still have a home together?" I smiled at her. "It's taken some time, but I can see you're starting to understand my side. Let's say goodbye to everyone, then go home and let the celebration continue." Many years later, I was lying in a hospital bed. David was helped into the room by Julie and Jack, the man I had loved since I first met him over 60 years ago. Our grandchildren followed behind. My time was near. and they had all come to say goodbye. A tear rolled down my cheek. We were both over 85. His eyes still shone, and his body was as weak as mine, but his mind was sharp as ever. He knelt down by my bed. I felt my brow crease with worry. Julie smiled and said, "Don't worry, Mom." Jack handed David a small box, his hands steady. He opened it, and I saw 2 rings. He picked up one ring, took my hand, and placed it on my finger. Then he put the other ring on his own finger. He looked at me and said, "I love you. He'll see you soon, Mrs. Mitchell." He hadn't called me that in years. In the eyes of our family, we are now husband and wife. I looked up and saw tears in some eyes. Jack helped him sit in the chair next to my bed. David's hand found mine and gave it a gentle squeeze. I smiled at him. "I love you." He smiled back. Then he turned his head to look at the family, and so did I. His hand in mine went limp. Julie noticed and quickly took his other hand. "Dad, Dad," she said. Jack held the call button and pressed it again and again. I looked at her while tears streamed down her face. "Don't worry," I said softly. "Ever the gentleman, he has just gone ahead to open the door for me." A warmth spread through me as I closed my eyes.